listeners. Welcome to the first episode of Doorbeen, the podcast series by Center for Peace and Justice, Brac University, in short, CPJ. The guests for the episode are Barrister Manzoor Hasan, Executive Director, and Shahariar Sadat, Director, Academic and Legal Empowerment, CPJ. And they're going to give you a glimpse on how CPJ started its journey and making its way forward to promote peace, social cohesion, and justice with an indomitable spirit.
Happy birthday to CPJ. This is the 6th birthday of CPJ, and this is the first podcast that we are doing. How do you feel, Manzoor bhai?
Well, I feel that, the 6 years have gone by like a flash, but it's really a wonderful feeling to have celebrated yesterday, our 6th birthday, with all of the colleagues at the office. It's always a huge satisfaction when you look back and you see so much has been done in a short period of time, particularly given the fact that, we've been through this terrible COVID period,
Right.
Which has affected the whole world. And but the important thing is that we are still here, and you're here, we are all here, and we are doing our first podcast for CPJ. So exciting moments.
Absolutely, and my nowadays my favorite thing is when I introduce CPJ, I tell them we are still a toddler.
Yes, very much so. I mean, I suppose it's kind of like the life of a cat. Even though it may be only 10, 15 years, but you have to do a lot of work in that period.
Exactly.
So it's kind of squeezed within a short span of time.
So for our listeners, I want to go through the journey that we had so far.
Sure.
We know that you were brought into this work in 2014, and you started, I always say that you started as one-man army. So how did that happen? What's the background?
Well, the background is quite amazing, because if I just go back a bit, I was with the university for quite a while. I mean, I was, as you probably know, I was involved with the Institute of Governance Studies. It started as a Center for Governance Studies way back in 2005. And I then remained with the center, and then it became an institute until 2011, late 2011, when I left. When the center became an institute, and then it was about to amalgamate with Brac Development Institute. I took a year off and was on sabbatical, and I was doing some research, and I was out in the field doing some field work. And suddenly I noticed my phone was kind of ringing and kept ringing, and it was from Brac. When that happens, I know that this call is from a particular person. That's Fazl Hassan OBE. So I took the call, obviously, and he said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm actually out in the field doing some research, field work." He said, "I'd like to see you. Please come and see me when you're back in Dhaka." So I came back and saw him, and he was basically kind of thinking about the end of the Millennium Development Goals. I'm talking about 2013, end of 2013 or beginning of 2014. And he was very much involved with the reformulation or putting together the new goals, which became Sustainable Development Goals. And he was particularly keen on the issue of justice and social empowerment, legal empowerment issues, and he was working with number of people globally to establish these goals. So he felt that Brac University should have an agenda which would focus on some of the new targets, goals within the SDGs. So there was also an institute affiliated to Brac University called the South Asian Institute of Advanced Legal and Human Rights Studies, shortly known as SAILS. Not sales as you sell, but sail as you sail away in a boat. He said that Brac was involved with, the university was involved, affiliated to the institute. He was on the board of trustees. So was I actually, with Dr. Kamal Hussain and Professor Jamilur Raza Chaudhry and others. And he felt that sales could be a perfect vehicle to push this agenda forward. And he convinced me, but didn't need too much of convincing, that I should leave the board and become the executive director of sales and start doing some work on this issue of legal empowerment. Just to finish that line, I said yes to him, and the work started in March 2014. Yeah.
Okay. So it was kind of, I would say, Sir Abed was part of the SDG formulation, and he kind of saw that peace and justice related sustainable development goal is coming, and he wanted to kind of start it ahead of that. Is that right?
Yes, I mean, he was, as I said, he was part of that whole discussion. And if I remember correctly, he was also a member of a commission called the Commission for Legal Empowerment and something. I forget the full title of it, where George Soros and Madeleine Albright and number of other very renowned individuals were also involved on that commission. So the expectation, I think, from Brac and Brac University was that it would kind of lead the work on legal empowerment, and that this is what prompted him to push this agenda forward, basically.
And for Sir Abed, the legal empowerment and work with the community was always kind of part of his philosophy.
Absolutely. I mean, the work of Brac, which started in 1971 with the liberation of Bangladesh, that was central, really, wasn't it? I mean, when the work started in Sylhet, that when he came back from India with a group of refugees, and really development started at the grassroots, and the community-based development work became a central philosophy of Brac.
So bringing this issue of legal empowerment within the university was like bringing the field knowledge and also connecting that with academia. Was it the philosophy of
well, one of the objectives of Brac University when it was established really was to actually bring in the work that Brac and others were doing in the development field, to kind of make them familiar, make the students familiar with that kind of work, and to actually learn from that experience. Not just kind of, as students, people tend to focus on theories and be in an ivory tower, rather than kind of look at it from an ivory tower perspective, but look at it from a grassroots perspective, from the community perspective. And this is where I think the university could actually, and has been actually, playing a very important role in bringing those experiences and philosophy and lessons into the curriculum, and so that people understand where we have come from and how the development process have taken place in Bangladesh, how women have become empowered, how girls have gone to schools, how sanitation has improved, how people have become kind of their own masters in terms of their kind of livelihood and destiny. And this is, I think, is very, very important, I think, for young people to understand in Bangladesh, and not just Bangladesh, I think throughout the world. And I think that Brac has taken this philosophy to not to just this region, but to the rest of the world.
Absolutely. So the initial years of I would say formative years of CPJ, I remember I joined the team in 2016. I think I was the third one after Zia and Shitappa, and I remember no one knew us within the university, because we were such a small team, and we used to tell everybody going around, and they would ask us, "Who are you?" And we would say, "Oh, we are Manzoor Hasan's team."
And I remember once or twice you used to say sales, and they used to ask you, "What are you selling?"
Exactly.
So that was quite a interesting period. Yes, I mean, as you know, I mean, when you start something, people don't know you. You have to establish your credentials, and that's, I think, what you guys were doing, going around, moving around, talking to people, establishing that.
It was so much fun, actually. Now look back, whenever Zia, Shitapa and I, we sit and talk, and we look back and we love those memories. We did not have a office space. We used to share somebody else's office space.
Exactly. And I remember that, I had one room to start off with in Siddiq Tower.
Siddiq Tower, 8th floor.
Yeah, on the 8th floor. And you guys were scattered all over the place. And we used to find a common space where we could sit down and have our meetings and things like that. But those were the kind of in a way, the difficult times, but also at the same time, extremely satisfying time. So that's how we all started. And as you rightly pointed out, that the work that we did on the legal empowerment issue became quite central in those days. And we worked quite closely with the Center for Social Justice, which is based in Ahmedabad. And that's how we started the work. And there were two kind of themes or tracks.
Two tracks.
Yeah. One was a national program, and the other was the regional program.
Yeah, the work of legal empowerment that we started.
Yeah.
And I think we kind of positioned ourselves as a knowledge partner for different legal empowerment organizations. That was what we decided to do at that time.
That's right. And if you remember, that came out of a need assessment sort of report.
Yeah.
And Dr. Jonathan Rose was involved with that. And basically we then had a workshop where we invited people from the region.
Yes.
And the decision was that we should really focus on the issue of legal empowerment capacity building.
Exactly.
And basically working with other organizations in Bangladesh and other South Asian countries. And that's how we started the training program.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And that went on quite successfully for nearly 3 years.
3 years, 15, 16, 17. We actually worked with organizations in Sri Lanka, in Nepal, in India. I remember attending a kind of TOT in Orissa, there were more than 17 organizations, grassroots organizations from all over Orissa, and it was amazing experience having paralegals and others coming from different parts of the province. And then nationally we did quite a bit of work with legal empowerment organizations, not only who are nationally present but also in the grassroots, in Khulna, in Barisal, in Tangail, and also in Sirajganj.
Right. And I think it also covered a lot of different groups of individuals.
Yes.
From students to women and to paralegals. So it covered quite a wide range.
Quite a while. And we brought in some people with kind of faith background and different linguistic minorities as well.
Right.
So we did this amazing paralegal training with Urdu speaking and Bangladeshi people and from people from other linguistic minorities, and it was an amazing experience bringing all of them together.
Yeah. And another, I would like to just highlight the other important thing that we did during that period was to develop a training manual.
Yes.
With the help of number of different legal empowerment organizations.
Yes.
And also, I remember, you will also remember that when that manual was put together and was finalized and was printed and was, we were going to launch it, we took that to Shahariar Sadat, and I remember the excitement on his face. Right, and the fact that we were going to talk to him, meet with him for 15 minutes, that became more than an hour.
Absolutely, and he was like, he went through the entire manual, asked us so many questions, and he was telling us that how this thing can be utilized in other parts of the world and how it can be rolled out in, especially I remember he mentioned East Africa. He said East Africa is kind of has got a lot of paralegals and the legal system is like that you can introduce. And he was like man of ideas and visions.
And we also have some lovely photos from that meeting.
Yes.
Which I remember. So yes, and in a way that was also the kind of the conclusion of that phase of our work, because I remember that we were also debating and discussing among ourselves the work that we were doing. How can we broaden that agenda? And I think that takes us to the next phase, Shahariar, right?
Yes, it was March 2017. And 22nd of March, we had the blessings from Board of Trustees of Brac University to form what we are now is Center for Peace and Justice. Do you remember that day?
Exactly. I remember that day because we were very nervous and we were very excited. And I remember we developed a concept note, and that concept note went through probably 20 iterations.
More than 20. I think at one point we stopped kind of numbering it.
What would be the kind of the thrust of the organizations, what would be our mission and vision. So we developed all that and put that in a document. And we also put together a PowerPoint.
I found the 10th version of the PowerPoint yesterday.
Okay. I'm sure there are probably more.
Absolutely.
But, yeah, I mean, I remember you and Sheta were out of Dhaka.
Yes, we were in Gaibandha at that time. We were with Friendship and at the Friendship Center working with their paralegals. And from the morning, so many times we called you and Zia. What is happening? When is it?
And finally, the meeting happened. I think if I I'm not forgotten the time, there was 3 p.m. on the 22nd of March, 2017. And I think I went into the meeting around 4 p.m., did the presentation, and got the nod that yes, CPJ will start as a center, and then eventually it will become an institute. And there was some discussion about the name.
Right.
What should it be called?
We suggested several names. How
we
did that
provided
happen?
a list of names,
Yes.
possible names for the new center. And then finally, I remember Sir Fazli Hassan OBE actually writing on a piece of paper, Center for Peace and Justice, CPJ. So that became the name for the new center, Center for Peace and Justice. And I came out of the meeting, and I think I rang you probably first and said that it's all done.
Yes.
It has been approved by the board, and we became, from what we were doing, we now got a new name and a new identity called the Center for Peace and Justice. So that's how we started our journey on the 22nd of March 2017.
Amazing. And here we are since then. And so after 2017, 2017 is actually what you said is kind of serendipitous, I would say. I'll go back on that because at that time in August 2017 the Rohingya influx happened, and you were there in Cox's kind of on a holiday.
On a family holiday.
Holiday.
I mean, I had no clue as to what was happening, but I remember sitting in the hotel room and watching BBC. They were kind of breaking news that people are coming into Cox's Bazar from Myanmar, and there's a confession to make. I mean, I was actually not at all aware of this Rohingya issue, and there were that refugees who have come into Bangladesh before. So it was for me totally a new topic. But I got very much curious and wanted to know, and I started kind of talking to people there. And then that was also the time when the Eid was happening. So I remember going to the prayers, and people were raising money to help the refugees who were coming in. So I saw immediate response of the people. and how closely they felt about it, and started doing things. So when I came back from Cox's to Dhaka, I kind of got in touch with some close friends, people who would know about this. One was Farah Kabir of Action Aid, Bangladesh. The other was Professor Imtiaz Ahmed of the Center for Genocide Studies at Dhaka University. And we actually then started doing some work which became very important later on for all of us, particularly for CPJ. We identified this issue of justice and accountability. All these people who were coming in, and because of atrocious things which were happening, events which have taken place, and we now know what happened there, killings and rapes and brutal torture that happened, which actually pushed all these people into Bangladesh, into Cox's Bazar, near Teknaf and other places.
I think in 2017, after this influx, what would be the few big things that we did?
Well, as you recall, we did this big conference with Action Aid Bangladesh and the Center for Genocide Studies.
That was in February 2018. February 2018.
Was it Feb or April?
Feb 2018.
Okay. Where we actually invited a lot of people, government officials were there, international organizations were there, and there was something which came out which became known as the Dhaka Declaration. In that declaration, we actually gave the background and then demanded certain things that should happen. And one of the things that we asked for was taking the matter to the International Criminal Court, seek justice and accountability for the atrocities that were committed on the Rohingya community people, right, in Myanmar. And that became also for us a big campaigning point.
And
issue.
CPJ was part of the ICC process, and as an amicus curiae, you submitted as well.
Well, the ICC process started quite early, and there was this issue about jurisdiction that came up, and a number of organizations from Bangladesh came together and put in an application in which we argued that there should be jurisdiction. There was an amicus curiae application, and I, together with another member of that team, became the co-signatory to that application, and together with good friends like Farah Kabir and Professor Imtiaz Ahmed and many others, became the kind of rallying point for our campaign, and subsequently the International Court of Justice also took up the matter, as you know. Yeah. So for us, that became an issue because we all felt that this should be high up on the agenda, the justice accountability issue. But there were at the same time other very serious matters which were taken up by Bangladesh and the NGOs and international organizations, the rehabilitation, the humanitarian effort that went into the rehabilitation and the safekeeping of these people's unfortunate people who were coming in with huge suffering, and so the operation was quite incredible that took place, right? If you recall.
Right, absolutely. So the initial work about the Rohingya refugees started with on international justice and accountability and advocacy at that level. And also we started doing research and other activities on the ground. I recall in 2018, and a big research we did with UNDP at the time on social cohesion.
Yes.
And ultimately that became kind of niche area for CPJ, looking at social cohesion in society, peace and cohesion. And then as we moved forward, I would say COVID came, and that 2 years of 2020 and 2021, whom I call them COVID year, as 1 year.
Yeah.
What was the experience of COVID, and how did did the center cope at that time?
Well, you rightly pointed out that we did go into quite a bit of research, and we had a very small group of people, researchers, who were doing quite a lot of interesting work. But the important thing was that we actually, if you remember, we actually went to the refugee camps and identified young people and got them involved in the research. And that was very, very important, because that later on became a strong kind of pillar for us in the work that we were doing. But you're right to remind us of the 2 years of COVID, or when the COVID started, basically in March 2020, when we all started working from home. That actually, at that time, if you recall, we had around 24 people at CPJ, including our colleagues in Cox's Bazar. But we actually became so active and got involved with so many research projects. During the 2 years of COVID, our number increased from around 24 to around 45, 46, something like that.
Wow.
Do you remember the correct?
Yeah,
something like that.
It was
we
around
nearly
45.
Doubled.
Yeah, nearly doubled.
We nearly doubled. And so what that tells us is that we didn't stop during the 2 years of COVID. We actually increased our workload. And that group that I mentioned, the network that I mentioned earlier on of young refugees in the camp, that became even more active and strong, because we actually got them involved very much in the kind of research and advocacy that we were doing. And we created a platform. And here some of my colleagues were very innovative and developed a platform on WhatsApp. And instrumental really was Jessica Olney, my colleague who worked actually in Myanmar, came over and joined us.
Absolutely.
And she took a leadership role, and with other members of our team kind of developed this tool, and became so important because during this time when we were disconnected, we actually connected on the WhatsApp platform.
Definitely.
And we invited speakers to come and to share their thoughts, and for our refugee boys and girls, men and women who were there, they could actually share their problems and challenges. So that was a very exciting time. Even though people were suffering, we actually did a huge amount of work, and the kind of reports that came out were put on the website, and some reports were actually also done for specific purposes, went to certain organizations which they found them to be, and they were very useful for them.
Right, and I fondly remember working with Jessica, and how she kind of brought in ideas and helped us to establish what now is Refugee Studies Unit. That kind of, I would say that she brought that idea of having that, and it turned up to be such a wonderful step towards our work with the refugees, because now we know that CPJ is grounded there. We work with both host community and the refugees, and we can very confidently say that the work that we do, it cuts through the surface and can find out more than what we see on the on the ground.
I mean, just to add to what you've just said, I mean, basically, we started the work in the camps before COVID, and I and Jessica, we used to talk about this, how to actually institutionalize that work. And I requested Jessica to put a concept note, to put a kind of a paper on the possible institutionalizing of the work. And that's how the idea of the Refugee Studies Unit came about. And finally, as you know, during the COVID period in 2020,
November 2020,
we actually officially launched the Refugee Studies Unit when the British High Commissioner, Mr. Robert Chatterton Dixon, came and actually did the opening. We also had other guests there, like, for example, the Dutch ambassador, Ambassador Letitia van Assam, and others were there.
Right.
So it was a kind of a very fruitful and very innovative phase for us, that particular period, and the work of RSU. And you are heading the RSU now, Shahariar,
Right.
and doing fantastic work. And I know that you've recently started the work on education with OSUN. Probably you can tell us a bit more about that.
With the Open Society University Network, we started this livelihood and lifelong skills building for refugees and also some of the host community learners, helping them to prepare for higher education, and helping them to learn some soft skills, life skills, so that they are ready for livelihood, especially Bangladesh's this emphasis on repatriation, of safe repatriation of refugees to Myanmar, and when that will happen, so that these young people are ready, and they can find opportunities there. With that aim, in synchronization with that policy, we started this lifelong skills building and livelihood program, and this is fascinating work. It did not happen before, and this work is not only going in Bangladesh, it is also going on in Kenya with the East African refugees. And you know that in Kenya there are more than 10 countries refugees are there, and also it is happening in Jordan with Syrian refugees. So this is very exciting work that we are doing now, and having kind of a global network, and learning from each country's unique experience, and it is helping us to improve our own quality as well.
Thank you. And in a way, probably coming to an end of this conversation, I would say that there are many challenges I think we are facing, particularly with the situation in Cox's Bazar, in terms of how things will develop. So this is something that we will probably keep an eye on, and also I suppose in terms of non-refugee work, our education work that we are doing, that has to probably, I see that as an area where we can do more work.
Absolutely.
And particularly one thing that we have not mentioned so far is the work of the peace cafes,
Right.
that we have developed over the last few years with the UN Women, assistance of UN Women. We have worked very closely with them in the initial years when the whole concept started to emerge in probably three years ago. And we now have number of peace cafes.
6 universities have adopted the model of Peace Cafe.
And we see that expanding in the years to come.
Right.
It's in a way kind of a movement, a peace movement. I see this as a kind of a peace movement.
Yeah, if we look back at the philosophy of the Peace Cafe, it was to develop leadership of youth, and especially women, and leadership in a non-political way.
Yeah.
And I see the role of this Peace Cafe is to create relevance for the institutions. Like whenever there is a university placed in a location, why that university is relevant for the communities living around that university. The Peace Cafe can be used as the vehicle actually to connect to the people around that university, doing some community-based work, and this
Exactly.
would expose these young people to understand what are the practical problems happening, so that it's not just they're learning from the books, they're also getting that practical experience of life and what is happening in the community. And this is also this thread connects us with Brac's philosophy of community-based work, I think, and it kind of all synchronizes and falls in very nicely.
Yeah, I mean, again, serendipitous, to use that word, all coming together
Right.
in a magical way.
Right.
And I think the other magic I would say is the kind of colleagues that we have around us, and the amazing effort that they put in and the commitment that they have. So it's been extremely satisfying and enjoyable experience over the last 6 years.
Absolutely.
Overall, that would be my assessment, and I'm really so grateful to all my colleagues, for giving the kind of effort that they have over the years.
Right. And looking at our team, I see that it's such a young team, and they have got so much positive energy and so much motivation to do the work, to carry on the work that we are doing.
Absolutely. So wonderful to talk to you, Shahariar.
Thank you, Manzoor bhai. And last thing I have been mentioning since last 2 days, actually, CPJ is Aries.
Well, I'm sure you're not going to give up on that point, and I suppose it is Aries, given the fact that we were born in wonderful month to be born, because this is also the month when we became independent.
Absolutely.
So month of independence.
Right.
So there are a lot of what should I say, notable dates in this month.
Absolutely.
But yes, CPJ is Aries. I agree with you, and let CPJ prosper in the years to come. Thank you very much.
Thank you.